What's goody, Hot Breathiverse? Welcome back to Hot Breath Live. This is our weekly live stream where we answer your comedy questions, and every now and then we bring on some special guests like we have today. This guy just dropped his second Netflix special, also just released a book, also has his own podcast called Bud Pods. But we're here to talk about the new special. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Hot Breathiverse. Mr. Phil Wang, everyone. Give it up for Phil.
Hey, everyone. Hello, breathers. Good evening.
Woo-woo. So, the new special, I should say. I didn't even say the name. But Wang in There, Baby is the name of the
Wang in
special.
There,
So we must get the Hot Breathiverse to go watch that special. You start off talking about reheating rice and the cultural differences between people that reheat rice and don't. And I'm just to come out of the gate on a Netflix special talking about something so silly. I mean, did you know this was your opener, or what made you land on opening with this kind of tone?
You know what it was? It was going on tour in the UK, and I'd gone on tour in the States in 2022 with like the old version of this show. Maybe it was about half the same. And you go on stage, and with a live show, with the tour show, there's a little bit of, "Hi everyone, how's it going? Wow, great to be in this town. Wow, it's busy. Wow, the people here are tall." Whatever observations you have, the food here is unique, and then it kind of settles everyone down, and they feel like you are in the room with them, and then that usually makes for a better tour show. But I noticed that specials that start that way are less effective, and I think I don't really like it when specials start with too much talking about the venue or talking about the city or talking about whatever. And in my first special, I had, because of the stage was so large, I had to go out and move the microphone, and I had to add like a line over it to explain why I was moving the microphone stand. And I just thought it just messed with the spontaneity of it. And so I thought, this special, I just want to start just straight off the bat, just get into something. And the big routine, the strongest routine I had was this rice routine, because it just hit so hard with especially white British people who, if you know this, I think I got lucky. I landed on an observation here that hadn't been touched on yet. And when you get to an observation like this that everyone relates to first, I think, you should make a big thing out of it. And so I thought, let's open with it. Open with the strongest. There's a rule of thumb that you kind of try and open with your second strongest bit and close on your strongest bit, right? So I thought maybe I was doing that. And also, because the routine starts with, I think the main difference between white people and Chinese people is, I think that's just a funny way to start a show. A cold open that just purports to make a sweeping statement about race. I just think it's a funny way to start a show, is just to go, this is the difference between these two races, by the way.
Yeah, and it's a good hook as well when we think about retention. It's also a great way. Both of your Netflix specials seem, not only writing wise and it being so tight to keep people's attention, but also visually, both of them are very engaging. Were you intentional about like set design and things like that and wardrobe?
Oh, thanks, man. Yes, this time around it really was. Last time I wanted to go for these block collars. The 80s sunburst was the theme I was going for. So the background had these kind of sunburst colors, sunset kind of colors, and block colors, and I wore block blue. And then after a year or so, I wasn't really into that outfit, and I thought I want to go for a different look. And then this year for this show on tour, I got a shirt for it that I wore every show, and it was this flowery shirt that was asymmetrical, that had these sort of square frame motifs and like stitch designs in them. And I thought, this is my show shirt. So I decided on the show shirt on tour. And then when it came time to look for a venue to film the special in, I thought, what venue is going to go with this shirt? So it started with a shirt.
Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, that is something I've noticed in your specials and also like your late night is yeah, how you look seems to be a part of almost like the filter that your comedy will come through. And I try to be more mindful of that now more than in the early days of comedy. And something I really admire about your comedy is how unapologetically silly it is. And you're not afraid to be goofy. And I think in like hearing other interviews you've done is that one time you were a little more serious and then you tapped into this sillier side. And I'm going through somewhat of like a evolution of I've been a little more serious and I do want to tap into this more youthful, silly, more closer to maybe my comedic voice. So how did you start to make that evolution?
I'm glad you made the observation because that was what I took away even from the last special. I watched it and I thought I seem quite serious in this, and in retrospect, we were still kind of in lockdown. It's sort of the end of lockdown, but the venue was still half capacity for social distancing. Everyone had masks on, and I hadn't seen my family in 2 years. I hadn't seen my father in like 2 years, and I was just like, I was just in a very serious frame of mind, and I think that came across in the stand up and in the special, especially with this motif that I came up with quite late in the day about COVID and Chinese people being the focal point of COVID, and that became the bookends of the first special. But it was quite serious, and then this time around, I thought I wanted to do something kind of different to the first one. Instead of it being a bit more serious and in a really big venue, let's make it sillier and in a small venue. And
Mm-hmm.
I just thought it'd be interesting to kind of turn it on its head in that way. But also, I think as the pandemic receded into the past, my silliness came back, and I became lighter with myself about how to do the tour and do the show, and I was a little more free with myself about what material I could do in the show, and that if I came up with a new routine that I preferred to an old routine, I would swap it out in the show. Beforehand, I would have been very rigid about the material that was in the show, and I say, this routine is in there, and if I come up with a good new bit, then I hold on to that for the next show. Whereas this time I was like, if I come up with a good new bit, let's put it in this show and push out my least favorite bit in the show and just keep doing that so that by whatever time I film the special, it'll be the hour of best material that I have.
Mm-hmm.
And just treating even the structuring of the show with that kind of lightness allowed me to perform with a lightness, and the ideas became lighter and sillier, and so it all sort of played into itself in that way.
So it almost started out with the intention or the mindset of I want silliness to come across in my comedy. So you just setting that mindset shift started to kind of attract those kind of
Yeah,
new bits like that.
yeah, because I think your process, the way you do comedy, where you do it, how regularly you do it. I think it all plays in. It's all part of the same ecosystem, right? If you live your comedy life in a very serious way, I think your comedy can get quite serious. If you live it in a lighter way, your comedy can stay light. I think, but that's tough because especially if you're working really hard, if you're traveling a lot, if you're very tired, that can all feed into your stage persona and how you are on stage and the ideas you come to and the punchlines you come to and the topics you come to. So it all kind of plays into itself. It's like a feedback system.
Especially with it's like when it's your job, like when comedy is the job and not just
Yeah.
the fun hobby you do at night while you have a day job, it can, if you're not careful, kind of suck the fun out of it. Or you start to try to
Mm.
force things instead of just remembering why you started to begin with.
Totally, exactly. And there's such a difference between when you start a comedy and when you're established in comedy. When you start comedy, no one's expecting anything from you. And those, you never get those years back, and they're the most fun years. You know, those
Mm.
first couple of years when I graduated and I was in London and I was just traipsing around London, just doing gigs, and no one knew who the hell I was. And people would see me come on stage and they were like, a Chinese guy, really? And they would just had their expectation was like here. And then I'd be good and I'd just blow their minds. Then I'd move on to the next thing. And that was so fun. And I'll never have that again because now, you know, I'm a few shows in, people have seen me on TV, have seen the special, they've seen me on tour before. They come to me expecting a certain standard. And that's a privilege. And that is literally my dream. And it's hard, it makes it much harder. And it's not like, let's go on and try a completely different style of comedy today or a completely different type of joke. When I started, I was at university really when I first started doing comedy, and there's so many gigs and in the uni, and I went through like different styles during my time there. I started off like a running around bouncy kind of comedian. What's the I mean, here we have Michael McIntyre. In the States, what's the guy's name who's very like big and silly and like full of energy?
Pete Holmes?
No, I would say he's a generation or two older.
Sinbad.
No, white
The good one.
guy.
White guy. A white.
White guy.
A
white
honky.
guy. A hunky, a big old hunky. Hopefully it'll come to me. And then I tried like doing one-liners, really serious.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got a ukulele and I did like musical comedy for a bit. Can you believe that? I was part of the problem, Joel. I was part of the problem.
But it's silly. So it's along
inherently
that
silly.
vein you were trying to tap into.
Yeah, well, I was just exploring different styles and, you know, seeing what stuck. But now, if I went on stage and started playing a fucking xylophone, people would go, "What the hell's going on?" You know, I'm just not. I don't think I'm afforded quite the open field that I started with. But so changes have to be a bit more subtle at this point, I think.
Man, tough life. After 2 Netflix specials and a book, you're like, oh, now people expect me.
I know. It's a prison. It's a gilded cage, Joel.
Is it not worth it? You're kind of on the other side of like comedians were working and grinding to be at a point where we do have established tours, go all over the world, have Netflix specials. So you've kind of checked that box. Is it all it's cracked up to be, or how does it feel up there, Phil?
It's good. I am glad. It's quite hard to appreciate it. If you're, you know, comedians are on the whole ambitious people, you know, and we rarely are able to take stock of what we've done. Mm-hmm. You're always looking up, and when you look, and the next thing, when you're always looking up, you can't see where you've come from. And even after my first Netflix special, I was already thinking, what was not good enough about it? What do I need to improve for next time? How do I make a better special if they give me another special? And that's how I think about everything. The best emotion I ever have over an accomplishment these days is relief. I just go, oh, okay, I didn't fuck that up. Okay, I can move on. But I never like yippee. There's hardly ever like yippee moments, I have to say. I hopefully this is just my personality type, and people can enjoy their successes. But I'm afraid to say it never really ends.
That's very comforting. At every level, you're like, oh, what next? What more? As opposed to just gratitude.
Yeah, that's right.
Wow, the future is so bright.
It is. I mean, it is. The important thing is that you keep making stuff and that it keeps getting better. I think as long as you keep getting better and the things you make keep getting better, that's the most important part. And and then you can always be happy with yourself then. Even if it
Beautiful.
all goes away, if people stop coming to the shows, if you stop being on TV, if you know, if what you're making is better than what you made before, that's the main thing I would say.
Well, speaking of making things better, we actually do have a question from Aditya Verma, and
Mm.
we also Goat-like personality has said he's in the delivery room with his wife right now watching
Oh,
this. So that is
wow!
he's
What an
putting
honor.
his life into your own hands there, buddy. I don't, I don't tell her we told you to do that. I just want you to know.
And the kid's
Um,
called Joel.
yeah.
It better be. It better be. If you got this playing on.
Seriously. Joel Phil. That's going to be the name. Or Phil Joel. But the question from Aditya, can you please advise on the writing process? Like first draft, need not to be forcefully funny. Funny comes after you try on stage, you refine it. So I guess Aditya is just basically
Yeah.
asking, yeah, your joke writing process from idea to comedy special.
Well, usually I start with an observation or just something I notice that either people say a lot or happens a lot in life. Like the rice thing will be one of those things. I just heard people saying that,
Hmm.
and I'd never encountered that before. And on the podcast I have with my friend and comedian Pierre Novelli, I brought it up one episode, and he said it's like people always say you can't reheat rice, and then it sounded right. It sounded like a routine, and so then I took that on stage. And then I just built lines around it and thought up scenarios and thought, what's a silly way for what's an exaggerated way of saying people react to this? And so I said, that the dad puts on a hazmat suit and takes the rice outside and buries it in the backyard. And the lines and the scenarios just kind of build and build and build, and you add them up, right? Or a punchline will come to me, and I reverse engineer the scenario to write the setup. And
Huh.
then when I go on stage and I try and improvise the links between everything. And a lot of the time, because you're on stage and you have to be funny, your survival instinct kicks in and you come up with a funny line in the link. And I can't tell you the number of times that what ended up being in the link gets a bigger laugh than what the punchline is. And so you find laughs in different ways. But for me, nothing beats the energy and the atmosphere of a comedy venue for making you write. So I now, I'm usually late on in the build these days, but I try and get to the show early at the beginning if I can. So like hearing the audience, I'm backstage, I'm hearing other people go up, and I'm in the rhythm of stand up, and I am in the context of stand up, and it's much easier to imagine what line will go well because you're in the room and you're in the venue, and I can come up with lines backstage and then try them out. It's much more difficult to write at home without the sound of an audience, without the atmosphere of a comedy venue. So a hack worth trying is go to gigs early and
Mm-hmm.
right before your set. That sounds scary, but I promise you there is a survival fight or flight, and hopefully you pick fight mode that kicks in and can really spark some creativity. So so that's something worth trying, I would say.
So when you record that set and then go back and listen to it,
Yeah, I
how
record all my
diligent are you
sets on
with
my
that?
phone.
Okay.
Yeah, I record my sets on my phone. If it goes well, I listen to it. If it doesn't go well, I delete it and then
Right.
listen
Yeah.
to it. I'm a bit of a hypocrite here because I I'm. Do you have this term confidence player in America?
I don't think so.
I think it's maybe a football soccer term. Confidence player is someone who plays better. The more confident they are, the better they think they are, the better they play. And I'm that for comedy, so I need to feel good at it. And And
Mm.
so I will listen to gigs that have gone well enough, and then I'll try and build on the lines listening back. But to be honest, I don't think the listening back does all that much for me. It helps me remember what I said. If I improvise something good, then I can listen back and and put it down in writing. But the official writing part now is I've only started quite recently. After learning from a friend, I write it onto a Word document now and try and write it all down verbatim, and then put a space in after every laugh. And there need to be so many spaces per page. If you have a big chunk like this with no space, that means you probably have to get a laugh in there. And you put a space in it.
Write out the joke
Yeah.
word for word.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
because I kind of
separate them
have.
by laughs.
I have like
So it's all very
new.
modular. So yeah.
No, go ahead.
It's all very modular because I studied engineering. I think of stand up in a very modular way. So your whole show is made up of modules of routines, chunks, topics, and then within those bigger chunks are the smaller routines, and then within those routines are the lines themselves and the jokes. So then so then you can break it all down in that way.
Interesting. So like each module is like a different topic, you're saying?
Usually it ends up that way. At first,
Uh-huh.
you just have your material and you write it all down onto a list, and then you'll notice that themes reoccur, and you can go, oh, these routines, and then here about food. So I can probably put all those food bits into the same chunk. Or if I want to do a callback, I take one of the food bits and put it later on in the show, and then I look really clever because I've done these food bits here, and then I call back to it later on with the food bit later on. But all I've done is move food bit later. Or this bit's all about race, so then I can do all the race bits in this bit. It also makes it easier to remember.
Yeah, and I noticed you'll repeat
yeah.
your premise a lot as well. Is that like as a point of reiterating it to the audience, or clearly it works for you? But yeah,
it is to reiterate it to the audience. It's something I heard. It's probably from Chris Rock. Actually, he's famous for.
Yeah, that's what came to mind. I know he'll do that. Yeah.
Yeah, he repeats a premise a lot, and I always remember something he said. I think he talks about being asked for advice by a newer comedian who can't get the joke to work.
Mm-hmm.
And Chris Rock says, well, they probably don't get the premise. A lot of the time is the premise. People don't understand. The punchline is probably fine. What needs work is the premise, and people need to really understand what you're talking about. So repeating myself is part of it is trying to hammer the premise into people's heads. And also sometimes it just sounds silly to repeat things, and that can be fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes me think of like your pervy joke where you talk about being a pervy kid and you just keep saying it and doing these expressions, and you keep saying a pervy boy, a pervy, like, and you say it in a bunch of different ways. Is that part of how you develop a joke on stage, is when you find something that gets a laugh? Are you then like, ooh, what are the different ways I can say it, or how can I just string this one thing along a long time?
So the perv routine, when I first started it, I'd start the bit by going, so I'm a bit of a perv, and people would laugh at that, just me out of nowhere saying I'm a perv.
So it immediately gets a laugh. Gotcha.
Yeah, and then I thought, well, how can I prolong this? Well, probably just by repeating it, and especially about being a pervy child is the reason I repeat that in that weird way is because I was concerned it's too unpleasant a thought for people. A pervy child is an unpleasant thought, but if I keep repeating it in a silly way, it'll make the premise silly, so people don't feel uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And at the end of that little bit, the bit that really gets a laugh and relieves the tension is I go, people thought I was shy as a kid. I wasn't shy. I was a perv. And in order to get that final, I was a perv, to really get a big laugh, I need to repeat it a whole bunch of times beforehand, so that people get tired of it and are worried that I'm going to keep doing it. And then I say, people thought I was shy, and that's just, people think, oh, at last we've got a break from, he stopped saying he's a perv. I wasn't shy, I was a perv. And and people go, "Oh no, we're back in it," and that gets a big laugh. I think the kind of bathos of people thinking they've got relief from it, but actually they don't. They're still in the nightmare, and by that point, they're on side with the premise.
Mm-hmm.
And this, which is another piece of advice I heard once on something, was, if you ever feel the audience pulling away from you, you mustn't pull away. You have to keep going, and you have to push until they accept the premise. And that's kind of what that was.
Yeah, one of my favorite, Alonzo Bowden, had a quote on here who said, "If you're afraid to say it, they're afraid to hear it."
That's very good. That's
yeah, that really hits home. So in the final,
that's really good. This is, by the way, quick. This is something I see new comics do all the time.
Yeah,
and it's deadly. Don't ever do it. Sometimes I'll see a new comic say something contentious or a bit on the line, and the audience will go ooh, and the comedian will then nervously go ooh back at them, or or echo the ooh. It's terrible. It makes you look like you've been scared by them. You must not mirror them. You have to push through them. You mustn't look unsure yourself. They're looking to you to be sure about the situation. Because really every audience at a comedy show wants you to be in control. They're desperate for you to be in control. If you're not in control, they're going to have the worst night of their lives. Once they feel that you're in control, they will relax, and they will be so much easier. They'll be putting in your hands, but you have to show that you're in control. So even if you feel unsure about something, you cannot reflect their nerves back at them. You have to. They're looking at you to be a leader, basically. They're looking at you to tell them, no, I am sure about this. I'm certain. I want to keep at it. And then they will relax once they know you're in charge of that room.
Gold. Well, we have arrived to the final minute. So thank you for your time, Phil, and helping the next generation of comics here. We're all about helping create self-made comics. So we appreciate you coming on today.
Oh, that's great, man. Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure to talk. And congratulations to your viewer who's a father, is it? About to be a father?
Oh, I'm yeah. I thought you were talking about me. I was like, I didn't mention that. I do have a child coming in December. I was like,
congrats.
Thank you. Yeah, it's my first.
Yeah,
so and then Goat-like Personality is his handle on YouTube.
Sure. I mean, I think there's time for one more question. If you do one more question, I think.
One more question?
If you want to do another question, just because I like
going into overtime. Ladies and gentlemen, the Phil Wang is going into overtime with the Hot Breath Verse. Thank you so much. That is so exciting. Ooh. There we go.
Wow.
So I know
you've got so many of these. And you see what I didn't do there? I didn't say woo back.
You didn't mirror. See, that was a test, Phil. That was a test. You passed. Yeah. So so we did have a few people commenting with some questions. So if y'all are listening to this podcast after, we do a live Q&A every Tuesday on our YouTube channel. So be sure to subscribe to our email list. You'll get updates on when we go live. But a question here. I'm trying to Adam Vale, did you ever take classes or have a mentor?
No, I never took classes. Some people do, and I think they're good for things. I think they're good for the basics. If you've never done stand-up, they're good for things like mic technique and literally like move the mic stand out of the way. And I think the basic things like that they're probably good for, especially if you've never performed in any guise before stand-up. But I would say they can only take you so far. But by all means, do a couple of classes. But I don't think you should lean on them. Ultimately, it should be quite a personal journey to sound American for a second.
Hey, what about any mentors?
Mentors. At university, there are older students doing comedy who I looked up to, who I would watch and maybe emulate. And I think you should always try and surround yourself with people who are funnier, people who are more
Mm-hmm.
experienced, and you should always be watching. Something I have noticed about American stand-ups when I'm over there is no one watches each other. Um, which I think is really bad. I go in the I'll go in the green room and everyone's just on their phones and they're not watching each other. And I think we watch each other a lot more in the UK, and I think it's good for you.
Interesting. Yeah, I totally agree. I always try to watch the show as well, like you said, just to get even just a vibe for the audience and what their overall temperament is that evening.
Exactly, exactly. And just to get in the headspace.
Great. A random one. Have you ever had to go to the bathroom really bad on stage?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I've had to go to the bathroom really badly just before getting on stage, and then something called Doctor Theatre kicks in. And do you have this phrase, Doctor Theatre?
No.
Oh, it might maybe it's like a drama kid kind of thing here, but there's this thing, Doctor Theatre, and like if you're sick or you need a shit and you had no time to go and you need to get you're due on stage. Once you get on stage, you're fine. You're actually fine, and your body realizes I cannot do this right now. I'm gonna have to put it away, and you usually are fine. So I've never had to like I've never had to leave halfway through a show to go to the toilet.
And Chicken Joe Clark, what is an opinion or belief you held that you recently changed your mind on? And this could be comedy
Oh,
related. Of like
oh
something
yeah,
early
right.
on in comedy you thought was true that you wish you knew now, or
Oh, so opinion I had that I've changed my mind on. I think there definitely are plenty.
okay, reheat rise. I just love how you say that. It's funny, like you're writing on one level and then your delivery on another. Just in the middle of that bit, how you say reheat rise. I don't want to gentrify your bit, but
No,
it's
no, I
just
love
the
it. I like
delivery
that a
seems like
lot.
another dimension you really intentionally add to your jokes.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I try and imbue it with a silliness. Um, I mean, I guess something that I used to believe, but that I've changed my mind on, is that I can get away with not writing it down and not looking at it forensically. The material that is.
Mm-hmm.
When I started, I would write everything verbatim onto a sheet of A4, just be prose, and I'd learn it like a script. And then as I got more confident, I would just kind of come up with the ideas and make some brief notes about it, and I'd try start writing the show onto Word documents, and then kind of give up a third of the way and go, I remember it, it's fine. And then recently talking to a friend about it, uh, talking to Pierre, who I do the podcast with, about it, he was like, "No, you really should." And his shows are so greatly structured, so brilliantly structured, and so I adopted it. I adopted being much more disciplined about it in the run up to the filming this special, and it was definitely helpful to see it written out like that and see the spaces and see where the problem areas are. So I now I'll write out the routine, and then bits that aren't working I'll highlight in red, things that are now working I'll highlight in green, things to try I'll highlight in yellow, and so I can
Uh-huh.
go back and so it's I've got a traffic light system basically for the lines.
And this is in like
So yeah,
a just a doc, just like a Google Doc or
yeah,
on your computer.
just word files. So I just have a folder for each show, and then each routine has its own word file, and so then I've got a Mac, but you can have the icons floating around, whatever you use, and so then I can move the icons around, and then that also becomes the what's the TV term for it, the flow chart,
Storyboard.
the storyboard, yeah. So then you can kind of storyboard your show with word documents.
Yeah, I know things too, kids. All right, it's not just the guests. Okay, I've been cut out of plenty of TV shows, so don't don't get it twisted. And let's do the final question here from Curry Kumar, when did you find your character on stage? Like who you are, your comedic voice? Like when did you really start to tap into it and think, oh, I'm onto something here. This is new territory and I want to lean into this?
I'd say it still is an ongoing process. Yeah, it took a while. I would say the first time I did a stand-up show we have here called Live at the Apollo. Um, it's my first big TV stand-up gig, and I came on stage, and I was just talking like I started talking like a 1950s crooner. I was like, "Hey, it's me, Phil Wang. Phil Wang. Here we are, Phil Wang." And what's weird is I'd never ever done that material like that. Something about getting on stage, that big stage, I just became this really silly kind of crooner, who said my name many many times over. And that moment was kind of when I found a big element of my voice, and my voice now is sort of a version of that. It's but that's when it happened for me. But again, it still is changing, and I'll listen back to a performance even now, and I'll say I don't like my character on that. I don't like my pitch of voice. I don't like how I'm delivering that. Next time, let's try and be sillier. Let's try and be more active, more loud, higher pitched. Sometimes I'll listen back and I'm like mumbling, and I'm like, why am I doing that? So it's always something you've got to keep an eye on for me. But different acts are different. I think some people are just very, because I don't know about you, but I have to turn it on. I think my theory is that people are comedians because either they're smart or they're funny. People are funny because either they're smart or they're funny. Some people are funny because they're funny. They're just always funny. Some people are funny because they're smart. They've figured out what comedy is, and they can build a joke because they've identified the patterns and the logic. And I'm that. I think I'm funny because I'm smart. And so I do have to turn it on. It's a small switch, but I do have to turn it on. And sometimes I turn it on a bit wrong. And I have to be aware of that. I think people are funny because they're funny. They don't have to turn anything on, and their voice is quite consistent. But because I am performing, it's a conscious thing. So
Yeah,
I guess I'm saying it's different for different people.
Yeah, I'm more introverted. Like before the show, I'm not really cutting up with the other comics and things like that. I'm more trying to save it for the stage because I feel if I burn it beforehand, then I don't have it when I'm on stage. It could be a mental thing, but that's how my approach to like a pre-show routine.
You know what's funny? I did a lot of competitions when I was starting out, and I would observe people backstage and how they were backstage, and some people backstage to be really like big and like, oh, here we go, and like riffing with everybody, and being really big, and then there'll be other acts who are just in the corner by themselves, like just keeping to themselves and being very quiet. And I built, I would watch how they would then do on stage, and then I remember years and years later when I was more established, I was in Australia, in Canberra, and they asked me to host like the final of their Neo Act competition there, and I said, sure, that's fine, that sounds fun. And backstage again, there was a guy who was, whoa, hey, everybody, hey, well, look at this, whoa, we're about to go on stage, make competition with each other. I'm gonna kill you. Just kidding, maybe you'll kill me. And there was a girl in the corner who was just like quietly like this, And I just in my head went, he's gonna die, she's gonna kill. And that's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened.
What are you before a show? Are you more silly or more subdued?
I'm very subdued. I mean, especially in those competition days, so it's just all in my head. It's just like,
yeah,
to remember the lines, and But I felt so intimidated by the others because they talk about like work they were already getting, or people, established comedians they were writing for, or working with, and I was just trying not to hear it. Yeah, so I would also say don't listen to all the posturing.
Yes. Yeah,
Just
that's
on your own
that's
stuff.
great. Yeah, I think as we land this plane, I think that's the overall takeaway for me is it's easy to see someone at your level and assume it's all figured out, it's all easy. They did the hard part. But what you've mentioned over and over again is just how much intentional work you're continuing to put in to develop new material, to refine material, listening to material, creating set lists, and grading your jokes and things. So things that a younger comic may think, oh, I don't need to do that. I hear this comic writes on stage. I'll just go write on stage. I'm the chosen one. But the reality is it's a lot of invisible work that I think
Yeah.
you've added hopefully some clarity to people that, oh yeah, this is a job.
Yeah, and also I think on knowing and being honest with yourself about what kind of comedian you are and what your process is. And if surely we'd all like to be a Bill Burr who can just get on stage and riff
Mm-hmm.
a routine. But if you aren't built like that, you just aren't built like that. Figure out how you are built, and work on it that way. It doesn't make you better or worse. That's just how you are. You get better by knowing how you're built, and helping yourself.
Boom. Phil Wang, thank you for going overtime here for the
I know,
comedy
it was a
community.
pleasure, and those questions are great.
Yeah,
Thanks so much,
we're all
Joel.
about comics helping comics, so we appreciate you helping the next generation here. And of course, people listening, go watch Phil's new special, Wang and Their Baby, on Netflix, and watch his other specials as well, Philly Philly Wang Wang. I mean, it sounds weird promoting these names, but they're absolutely killer. And one of my favorite, I had seen like your clips, but to get to dive into your work, you instantly became a favorite of mine, of just how
Ah,
unique your point of view is in your style in comedy, and my aspiration to be sillier and a little more just loosey goosey. It's really inspired me to keep following that path and really tap into it. So thank you for that inspiration as
oh, that's
well.
awesome. Thanks, Joel. It means a lot. Thanks, man.
Is there anything else? I know you have your book Side Splitter available, which a member of the Hot Breathiverse actually messaged me saying she's in the middle of reading your book and she hates she couldn't make this today. But go check
Ah,
out his book. Anything else you'd like to promote, Phil? I don't want to step on. I just want to make sure we support you as well.
oh yeah, hit up my Instagram at Wang Pics, Wang Pics with an X. Um,
Is that your OnlyFans? Is that your OnlyFans? Is
I
Wang
mean, if
Pick?
it gets to, if that's where this goes, then I'm not going to fight the current. So that's fine with me. You do what you can. You do what you must. I've got a podcast called Bud Pod with my friend Pierre, and that's a lot of fun. And yeah, if you're in the States, keep an eye out. I'm going to try and get there at some point soon. But yeah, the main thing is please watch Wang and Their Baby, my new
Yes,
special on Netflix.
absolutely. Phil Wang, thank you so much for spending your valuable time with us, and we will keep in touch, buddy. You have a good night out there.
You too, Joel. Thanks so much, man. Lovely to chat. Speak
Yeah,
soon.
cheers.